Some warriors dedicate themselves to the discipline and art of combat. They believe that by suppressing their inner savagery of bloodlust and maintaining inner peace, tranquility, and refinement, they can become greater warriors as a result. And there is merit to this, of that there is no question. Many modern martial arts are built on that philosophy. And yet, there are some warriors who believe the opposite, that to become greater, they must embrace their inner beast. They fall back into primal forces deep in the ancient history and mindset of man. They fall back into the bosom of feral ferocity and bestial fury. These warriors can be found in any culture of society throughout history, but in For Honor, we call them berserkers. But who are the berserkers? What are they based on? Is there a realistic counterpart we can draw reference from in our history? Let's find out. Welcome back to Heroes in History, where we analyze every hero in For Honor and discover who they are most likely based on and if they do their counterpart justice. And today, we're looking at the Berserker. The Berserker in For Honor is described as a warrior who is possessed by the spirits of wild beasts that roam the lands of Valkenheim.
The vast forests of our lands are said to be filled with the spirits of beasts. Sometimes those beasts join us on the battlefield. Berserkers.
When the time comes for war, these lightly armored warriors rush into the battlefield with the ferocity and viciousness of a wild beast to mutilate their enemies with twin axes. The trailer makes it incredibly clear that these warriors aren't just dangerous because of their twin axes, but because of their passion, their resolve, and their fury.
They fight with twin axes, but their true weapon is their passion.
This is a very important aspect of the Berserker's identity, and we will return to it. But for now, I'd like to go a little further about some other aspects of Berserker in-game. Berserkers go into battle wearing minimal armor, sometimes even a partially open shirt to flash their chest. Most do not wear helmets, but have exposed heads with wild hair or dreadlocks. Their primary weapons are twin axes, weapons focused primarily on vicious attacks that will mean little in means of defense or control. But again, I think that's another clue to the puzzle. And finally, the trailer grants us a single riddle.
There is an ancient riddle. What is stronger than steel? Blood, our answer. Blood and fury.
The weapon stronger than steel is blood. Blood and fury. And this may seem a little weird, but this is likely both a literal and metaphorical thing. But all of this we will get into. Now, all of these clues have led me to conclude, and I'm sure many of you have concluded it as well, that these warriors are most likely based on the real-world berserkers of Nordic history. More specifically, the wolf warriors known as, and forgive me if I mess up the pronunciation, Ulfhethnar. But let's focus on the berserkers as a whole for this video, and I'll explain why I think they are based on the Ulfhethnar specifically later. Now, it should be made clear that the actual history of berserkers is a little muddy. We know that they existed, and we know that they were chronicled about by Rome, Byzantium, and pagan tribes. However, what they were capable of and how they were able to perform the feats that they were legendary for is still a matter of debate among most scholars today. And today, we're going to discuss a few of those debates, and I'll give you my own opinions on certain aspects. Now, first of all, the name Berserker comes from the Nordic word Berserker, and it roughly means bear shirt, or bear pelt. This is likely to mean that these warriors rushed into battle in bear hides or some kind of animal hide. Evidence of such warriors can be found on Trajan's column in Rome, a large column with pictorial depictions of the conquest of Dacia by Emperor Trajan in 101 AD. In one of the scenes of the column, I believe it's column number 36, warriors were seen barefoot, bare-chested, and wearing what appeared to be bear hoods on their heads, while others were seen wearing wolf hoods. Since then, occasional accounts of berserker warriors have appeared in different written pictorial and verbal accounts throughout history. One of the most prominent comes from Emperor Constantine VII of the Byzantine Empire, who described the strange trance berserkers entered in battle and the fighting visage it can create for those who see it. He was likely very prone to seeing these because Vikings and Byzantium were often at war with each other, and when Byzantium adopted the Varangian Guards, who came from Nordic Vikings, there were some berserkers that joined the Varangian Guard. Now, berserkers are mentioned frequently in sagas and ballads. The most famous one known is from the saga of Harald Skefethi, in which the berserker of Harald are described thusly. I'll ask of the berserkers, you tasters of blood, those intrepid heroes, how are they treated for those who wade into battle? Wolf-skinned they are called. In battle they bear bloody shields. Red with blood are their spears when they come to fight. They form a closed group. The prince in his wisdom puts trust in such men, who hack through enemy shields so well. Another famous saga, written by Snorri Sturluson, described berserkers thusly. Odin's men rushed forwards without armor. They were as mad as dogs or wolves. They bit their shields and were strong as bears or wild oxen, and killed people at a blow, but neither fire nor iron told upon them. This was called Berserker. As you can see, one of the largest issues with studying the Berserker is separating the fact from the fiction. There's clearly a lot of legendary skill and power and danger behind what a Berserker was, but how much of it is real and how much of it is speculated? How much of what is true that is said of them? One thing we can say for sure is that in every account of Berserkers that we've seen, they are described as entering a trance-like state known as Berserker, a state that the Emperor Constantine VII of Byzantium described as follows, quote, "This fury, which was called Berserker, occurred not only in the heat of battle, but also during laborious work. Men who were thus seized performed things which otherwise seemed impossible for human power. This condition is said to have begun with shivering, the chattering of teeth, and chill in the body, and then the face swelled and changed its color. With this was connected a great hot-headedness, which at last gave over into a great rage, under which they howled as wild animals, bit the edge of their shields, and cut down everything they met without discriminating between friend or foe. When this condition ceased, a great dulling of the mind and feebleness followed, which would last for 1 or possibly several days." End quote. Every reference to berserkers made references this strange trance that they entered, this weird, frightening battle trance that made them unable to tell friend from foe and would kill anything in their path, where they chew on their shields and scream and howl like wild animals. In fact, it's speculated that part of the reason berserkers wore animal pelts was not just to scare the enemy, but was to warn their allies about where they were and not to get too close, because in this trance the berserkers wouldn't be able to tell friend from foe and would kill anyone close to them regardless of whose side they were on. They would behave like savage animals, wild and bloodthirsty. And it's in this wild and frenzied transformation that some believe helped give rise to the myth of the werewolf. But what is Berserker really? Like, what actually is it? Scholars have speculated the actual cause of this trance for years, and there are various theories that have been presented. One theory presented, and it's a very popular one, even though there are questions about it, it's argued still by some scholars today, but I will discuss the problems with it, is that berserkers would consume a certain hallucinogenic drug, which would drive them into fits of rage and hysteria. Now, Howard D. Fabing, in his article Going Berserk, A Neurochemical Inquiry, makes much the same argument. Though the theory is questionable, there is some evidence to suggest that legitimacy. In some Viking grave sites where berserkers were thought to have been buried, or at least lived, seeds have been found in the tombs from a native plant called henbane, or Hyosmachus niger. These seeds, when consumed, produce symptoms in the consumer not unlike what a berserker rage is described as. It is a hallucinogenic drug. The problem is we haven't found a whole lot of these, so it's hard to know if this was actually something Vikings would take, or if it's just a coincidence. It is a cool theory, though, and it would explain a lot of things. There's also the explanation that berserkers might have found a way to create self-induced states of hysteria, epilepsy, or perhaps some berserkers suffered from mental illnesses. I doubt the mental illness aspect very highly, because it's hard to get a whole group of warriors who actually do suffer from mental illness and throw them into the battlefield, and then expect them to be lucid later on. The most interesting theory I've heard is that these Berserker trances were actually not anything real or supernatural, but rather intentional behavior by the Berserkers, a kind of psychological warfare. They themselves use this psychological warfare to strike fear and intimidation into their enemy. There are some sagas and texts that describe Berserkers actually having lucid conversations during and after battle, which they shouldn't be able to do if they were really possessed by animals. While it's possible that these Berserkers simply were not on drugs or activating their self-induced hysteria, it's also possible that some of the legend of the Berserker is just that, a legend. Think of it like this. If you're from Byzantium and you hear legends of these dangerous, powerful Viking warriors who wear bear or wolf pelts into battle, and these monsters are so deadly and fierce that they can ignore pain or injury and would kill their own comrades if they got too close, now you're out on the battlefield and you see a bunch of Vikings wearing those bear pelts coming at you, suddenly those stories start sounding and feeling more real. So you avoid fighting them if you can and run away. They never even have to get to you. Now again, I don't know how much of that is true and how much isn't, but it is a speculated theory and would be a great use of psych-out warfare. I do believe, however, that there is some legitimacy to the Viking berserker gang. It could be a matter of heightened adrenaline. It could be hallucinogenic drugs. I actually do lean a little bit on the hallucinogenic drugs and psych-out warfare. Probably a combination of the two. But I can't say for certain. One of the negatives of studying up on berserkers is that there's so much question about what really causes their berserker trance. We may never know for sure, but it is fun to speculate about. Now, there are some who believe that their berserker gang trance comes from a spiritual and psychological method. It's widely believed that there were 3 animal cults of the northern territories of Europe from which the Vikings hailed, from which different warriors worshiped the animals of importance to their faith, and through shamanistic rituals and ceremonies, they might mimic and take on the traits and mindset of these beasts. The 3 cults included the bear cult, the wolf cult, and the boar cult. Now, the bear cult is the most famous of the 3 cults and the most widespread, and likely where the term berserker hails from, as the warriors of the bear cult were said to be draped in the pelts of bear pelts during and after funeral rites, and bearskin caps are still worn by Danish royal guard today in honor of the bear cult's history in Denmark. But, while the bear cult is the most popular and most common of the cults that we hear about, let's briefly touch on the other 2, because I do want to go into one of them with more detail later. Now, the wolf cults, Ulfhethnar, which we talked about earlier, were their own feral warrior group, very much like berserkers. In fact, they're believed to be a kind of berserker. These Ulfhethnar warriors, though, wore the skin of wolves and are described as equally feral in battle. We know that they did indeed exist, as there are evidence of their captured battle standards displayed in Rome to this day. They were described as warriors of Odin, and it was documented in more than a few sagas that the early Norwegian kings were followed constantly by a guard of Ulfhethnar. Now, the other cult is the Jofur, or boar warriors of the boar cult, and they're not nearly as popular, and it's actually a mystery if they truly existed. Most of what is known about them comes mostly from mythology. The wild boar was sacred to the Vanir, and the goddess Freya owned her own battle swine, among other things. While there are Swedish and Anglo-Saxon depictions of powerful boars in battle, these are likely just references to the mythical swine of the gods who charged into battle. Whether or not there were really boar warriors in history is a mystery, and I kind of doubt it. But it's not a laughable theory. Wild boars are notoriously vicious and savage. They can cause a great deal of damage and are known to be resilient. The idea of some warriors being inspired by them is not too beyond the realm of speculation. So, now that we've gone over the little history we do know about berserkers and what we are sure of, how can we relate these things to the berserker in For Honor? Well, for starters, berserker focusing on minimal armor and using primarily offensive battle tactics over defensive is very much like what real-world berserkers might have done. Berserkers focused heavily on savagely attacking their enemies, foregoing heavier armor beyond maybe some chainmail at the most, and choosing instead to cause damage fast and brutally. They were shock troopers. Berserker in the game is also the only assassin in the game with hyper armor, meaning he can furiously trade blows with his opponent while taking damage, being uninterrupted. Almost like how the real-world berserkers were described as being immune to pain, fire, steel, or damage. There are records of berserkers during their berserker gang trances ignoring pain and fighting on in spite of it. This is an excellent nod to the power of berserkers. He also is the only hero with the perk Berserk, which when activated increases speed, attack, and defense for a short time. Again, possibly a reference to Berserker Gang. A funny one that I thought about is the Berserker's emote Recognition, which has him point at his opponent and then begin to chant Trepa over and over, which means kill.
Yeah! Trepa! Trepa! Trepa!
This is ironic because Recognition is an emote every hero has where all of them perform some kind of honorable move to the person in front of them, like a bow, a curtsy, or some kind of respectful show of recognition. but Berserker simply points you out and begins to hype himself up for the kill. Not only to create intimidation, but also to begin building up his own, perhaps, Berserker gone trance. Now, as I said earlier, while Berserkers from For Honor are named after the Berserker warriors, and likely based on them, we could be more specific and say Berserker is specifically based on the Ulfethnar, the wolf warriors. But why though? Well, two of the ornaments available to Berserker and For Honor are wolf-related, one being a wolf skull, and another being a wolf head cap. And as said earlier, the Ulfethnar were known to wear wolf skins and hoods. In fact, Griffin, who we said earlier was based on the Varangian Guard, had a wolf hood helm himself, and there were reportedly Ulfethnar in the Varangians, so there is connection there. Moreover, most of the helmets of the For Honor Berserker have a specific mohawk dreadlock style look, which bears a slight resemblance to a hairstyle known as a wolf tail hairstyle, where the sides of the head are buzzed or cut close, while the top is more full, allowed to go down, and sometimes is tied into a tail at the back. It is a stretch, I admit, but it is something I thought was kind of interesting. Also, the Berserker, while having hyper armor and being resilient, they are not large or imposing, which you would expect from a bear-like warrior. Instead, the Berserker's fighting style is a mix-up light and heavy attack chain, feinting out of heavies to attack from another direction, and dodging around an enemy in a dancing pattern to change position and manipulate your opponent's guard and stance. Wolves in a pack perform very similarly, using their own movements and hit and retreat tactics, feinting in and out of attacks and strikes to wear down opponents, reveal openings, and then move in for the kill. Now, I do confess that this is more of a personal interpretation than anything concrete, but I believe there is enough evidence here to help defend this proposed theory. It should be noted that I'm not very good at playing Berserker, but one thing that I really love about Berserker is how passionate they are. I said earlier that I'd bring up the riddle that they said. They said that the true weapon of the Berserker is their passion, and that the thing stronger than steel is blood and fury. What did that mean? Well, it's something that goes along with the Vikings as legends. Why do we love Vikings so much? They're not as well armored or technologically advanced as the knights, and they're not as honorable or dripping with charisma and all that as the samurai were. So what is it about Vikings? It's their passion. It's the blood-fueled passion, the strange way that a Viking can work its way into our imagination. They don't seem that impressive when first glanced at, but there's something about them. The way they fight, the way they come, the way they attack. Berserkers represent this in a huge way. They're light armored, but they still rush into battle with fury and almost glee, enjoying the thrill of combat. Blood. Blood and fury is stronger than steel. It runs through them. Literally, it could be a reference to the hallucinogenic drug they take, being hyped up on dopamine that could make them fight harder and faster for longer. But it could also just be the way the Vikings have worked their way into our consciousness. We as humans like to believe we have conquered the wild, that we are above the animalistic and bestial nature of our roots. But this belief masks a concern, a fear. We can build walls, we can create laws, and we can arm ourselves with technology, ideology, and scientific discovery. But even with all these things, the wild finds us all the same. It does not dwell outside of our walls or outside of our laws. It lurks in our hearts like a wolf on the prowl. And when we let down our guard, it will claim us. Thus the man becomes the beast. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.
You lost Zone A.
Yo, I'm not even wearing a helmet. What is your major malfunction, brother? Drop dead.
Later. 12 seconds later.
Okay, so maybe I'm a little evil.
20 minutes later.
It's back for revenge!
Damn it! You captured Zone A.
Oh no! Not sure I deserve that.
1 eternity later.
I may have deserved that.
2 hours later.
I suppose you didn't deserve that one either.
No, that one I deserve.
3 hours later.
Can you move it along? I'm all out of time cards.
You think you can get rid of me that easily, Goblin? Not on my watch! My carelessly what? In your last moments, you look for an escape, any solace you can find, but it's just you and me, Tiny! Victory!
Almost lost my cool there.